Hello, my name is Karen Curry. I'm on the board of directors of American Insight, and welcome to today's Speakeasy. Something remarkable happened in July of 2021 in Cuba. Huge numbers of people took to the streets to demand that the government address the dire living conditions in the country. Huge numbers like that had not been seen on the street since the Cuban Revolution over 60 years ago. For decades, people in Cuba have lived with medical shortages, with food and water shortages, blackouts, lack of electricity, internet, and with repressive policies that challenged and violated free speech, freedom of expression, and the right to peaceably assemble. And in 2020, when COVID came, the government took draconian steps and virtually closed down the country, which galvanized people to take to the streets to speak out and to speak loudly. This year's American Insight winning film is Ellos Gritan Libertad. They Scream Freedom. It presents a hugely powerful and very disturbing image of life in today's Cuba. Today, we're joined by the writer and director Melinda Raebyne, and by Tommy Clark, the Cuban-American man whose voice guides the viewer through the film and whose face is actually never seen on the film, which we'll talk about. Hi, Melinda and Tommy, and welcome.
Thank you, Karen. It's nice to be here.
Karen. It's such a pleasure to see the both of you, and congratulations on the film. It's really very, very, very powerful. Melinda, I just wanted to start with you. So how did you come to know about what was going on in Cuba and decide to make the film?
It was through social media. To me, I personally took it as the Cubans' last resort, that they were screaming out and crying for people to see them, to hear them, and what was going on. And ironically, Tommy and I known each other, and for a while, for a number of years, and Tommy had the same things on his social media, and I reached out to Tommy, and from there found out he's in Cuba, has been in Cuba for a long time, and asked if he would trust me to tell the story, and here we are today.
That's great. And Tommy, so you I guess over the last 10 years have been going back and forth to Cuba, and you actually have a Cuban citizenship. What happened on that day, on July 11th, 2021? What happened, and how did you react to that?
History basically happened, if I could put it any easier than that. I was home on a regular, I think it was a Sunday morning, I can't recall what day of the week it was. And I was just playing around with my little dog in the morning, making some lunch, and I hear shouting. Something that you don't ever hear coming from the street. Like, my apartment has a balcony on this big main street, and I'm hearing people shouting like freedom and freedom and freedom, and I'm like, what's going on? So I run to the balcony and I see thousands of people just marching. It's like something you've never seen before, and it just instantly gave me goosebumps. I knew exactly what it was, because that was unheard of. That never has happened, and it was just something spontaneous and beautiful, quite honestly. So I was in shock, and I just ran out with my camera and my bicycle, and I just hit the streets and started documenting everything I can see. And I spent all day. That was early in the morning sometime, and I probably got home around sunset, right, riding all around Havana, filming different things happening.
When we spoke earlier, you had this funny story of how it happened so quickly, you just grabbed your phone, and then when you got down to the street, the battery died. Tell me how you...
Yeah, exactly. My phone was in charge. I'm home, next to the charger. My phone was in charge, so I ran out without seeing my phone charged, and I'm filming for like 1 minute, and my phone dies. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I run back up, and I had to get a power pack and rig it up to a backpack and plug it in, and it's like this loose little Cuban connection, and it's like it was funny. But I made it happen.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like it was a real surprise to see that kind of outpouring on the street.
Oh, absolutely. 1,000%. 1,000%. The only thing that I'm aware of that was similar to that instance was the Malaconazo, which was, I believe, in the 90s, during what they call the special period, when the Soviet Union fell and they stopped receiving all the funds, and they went to the streets as well. which is right next to my house, quite coincidentally. But it wasn't the magnitude what this was. This was the whole country, different cities, different provinces, all in unison. You know, I guess social media helped out a lot. You know, got the word out, and people saw what was happening, and they went out, hit the streets. Well, I saw old people, I saw kids, I saw women, I saw children. The majority was youth. I'd say roughly 16 to like 30 was about 80% of everyone. But it was a mixture of people. Yeah, it was a total surprise. Total surprise.
So Melinda, you then, I guess I understand you thought you might do a little short bit, but then once you and Tommy connected and you saw what he was getting, it evolved into something much greater. Kind of a really interesting production challenge for you. Tell me how you went about doing it.
Yeah, really quickly, just to put things in perspective and an understanding, when they went to the streets and protest and the thousands, and to do what they did, it was just beyond remarkable to get that communication out there to people. Where in the US, if we protest, we can share things freely, and that is not the case in Cuba. And they really are putting their lives on the line. I mean, to an extreme where people have lost their lives and can't be found, or in prison for a long time. I mean, these are what they were facing. They knew the consequences, and it was severe. It had a chance that they would never, ever come back. But the demand of libertad, the demand of freedom, was so great. And so as I'm working on this and I'm learning this and really having that information soak in and sink into me, I'm like, this is profound. I mean, what they're doing it's heroic, and just in hopes that the world would see him. And I'm so grateful for this festival, because it pretty much died in our media. It's the fight is still going on. There's still people in the US trying to do things, in Cuba trying to do things. You know, Tommy, for an example, is still doing things, and our media has not really touched it. And we are only 90 miles from this island. I just working with Tommy, finding out more information, I was like, it's too big of a story to try to fit it into a few minutes. And I always believe that you let the story dictate the length of the film. And I mean, really up until June this year, I was adding some things to it. And the latest thing I added was, and I didn't tell Tommy, because Tommy's a really humble person. And if I told Tommy that, he'd be like, no, Melinda, I don't want the film to be about me. But I was realizing the audience is not understanding the severity of the situation and what Tommy really gave up to get this story out there, and the risk that he was putting himself into, and the emotional turmoil that he was going through. So in the film, it's also woven his personal communications to me. And you know, I think that in America, we are given so much freedom. I mean, we still need to continue to fight for freedom, but we have a lot more that we end up in some ways. And I don't think it's, you know, necessarily intentional, but we take for our liberties for granted. And I hope with this film that we really have an insight, one, what's happening in Cuba. Hopefully we strive and want to do something to make things better. It's been 60 plus years, and you know, how much longer can people who are so exhausted in their heart, souls, can keep fighting without the support of the people around the world who have such freedoms? And also to understand what Tommy gave up, the extreme that he was willing to go to tell the story of what's happening to the people in Cuba. So yeah, I had to.
Thought it was very effective, the use of the communication between you and Tommy, because it got pretty hairy there for a while. And I remember reading, or maybe you mentioned it to me, there was one time early on in your communication with Tommy that you cried. And tell us about that and what you resolved after that.
There's an incident, and you know, Tommy's grabbing these footage. He's a amazing professional photographer. So I would send him snippets of my inspirational, storyboards, as we call them, or inspirational boards. Tommy would come out and he would just nail it and get me these shots and go beyond that and get, give perspective angles of the shots and even just throw in other things. Well, he's using up all of his data, and Tommy's like, look, I don't need money, but can you send me some data, and here's a company that, yes, for his phone, so we can continue staying in communications. Because by now, Tommy sent me all the footages that he's captured, his interviews, all of our communications was done in secrecy and through apps, and getting it, him smuggling it to me sending things out to him. So I was doing these like check-ins and seeing how he was, and just making sure that he was alive, and making sure that I had, know where he was at. And he's coming to, his data is getting really low, and funds on his end are extremely low. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'll could send some data. And he sends me the link, and we're going back and forth, and we're talking, and there was a little difficulty in there, but finally got that to go through, and said that I paid for the data. And Tommy's like, Melinda, the data's not coming in, I'm not getting it. And I'm starting to stress, because I know that he's low, and I did not want to lose that communication. I wanted to make sure we had the communication, those lines open. And I'm going back and forth, I'm trying to reach out to the company, and I'm starting to worry, like, okay, is the Cuban government, did they get some tabs notification? Do they know that something's happening? Why isn't the data going in? My mind's racing on that. And I was communicating to Tommy, and I lost it, and I started to cry, because I just, even just thinking about it, like, if something was to happen to Tommy, if I couldn't get a hold of him, the guilt, and it just would have felt so bad. I felt like I asked this man to do something, and I put his life on the line, and I wouldn't have been able to get to the island. If I got to the island, like, Lord God knows what it was I would have even been able to do. And Tommy was just, so sweet. He's like, don't worry. He calls me Mama Bear. He's like, don't worry, Mama Bear. Like, it's going to be okay. And I know Tommy is like trying to be as strong as he can be, and you're just realizing what danger you put your friend in. And Tommy's always been this upright man, human being, gentleman, stood up for my honor a number of times. He probably doesn't even remember it, but I remember it. And the guilt, the emotions, the stress. And I realized that I wasn't helping Tommy out. And I made this vow, I would never, ever again. Now that we're done, though, Tommy, and you're safe, obviously, that's okay, that I can let my shield down. But I made a promise and a vow, I would never, ever do that to Tommy again. He's got way too much that he's dealing with, and I need to be that backbone for him as much as I can from being in the States. And so there'd be many times after talking with Tommy, seeing footages, getting, in communications after that conversation, I would cry many times. And just,
Tommy, I saw you kind of tearing up a little while Melinda was talking.
A little bit.
Yeah.
She's taking me back, and I'm connecting with her feelings, and yeah, it was like she said it exactly. I could feel her empathy. I had empathy for what she was feeling, as far as like me possibly being in grave risk, and just by doing this. But I told her I'm all in. What happens. It's my decision. No one's making me do this. Even if the movie never gets made, someone has the story. Even if it's never showed anywhere, I needed to be told. I needed to sacrifice. Compared to the sacrifices that actual Cubans on the island have made for the last 62 years, a little jail time, I would have done it if I had to.
Wow. Well, the film does communicate the ratcheting up of the pressure, and as you refer, even in those communications back and forth, that you're feeling a bit paranoid. Partially, I'm sure some of it was real, maybe some of it was really just paranoia, but it was stressful. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about, I'm sure you only did this because you didn't want your face to be shown, obviously, because you had to be under the radar in
Right.
Cuba. And so that's a challenge, and probably and could be a negative challenge from a filmmaking standpoint. But to me, it turned out to be a very effective dramatic tool to telling the story. And tell us a little bit about how you set up to shoot those sequences in the apartment.
It was kind of funny because I just have this. This was a few years ago, and I already had like a 2-year-old cell phone. I won't lie, destroyed. So I didn't have any advanced technology. I didn't have a laptop. I didn't have my cameras. I didn't have any video camera. I had no lights. I went there for just a couple-week vacation. I ended up being for 2 years. So I just was creative from a little, ideas that Melinda had said. Can you get this? Can you get that angle? And then I just was creative around. I have to post it with like an ashtray and a lamp, and and get a light here and try to backlight this and shoot through that. I just used my creativity the best I could, and also without showing my face, and also not showing the building, the distinguishing mark of my building, because there were some shots that were really great shot from the balcony of me seeing the cityscape. But anybody in the government can figure out where that building is just by seeing the street and seeing the corners. So we had to like edit things out and crop things out. And I just shot a lot. I did a bunch of different things. And I also ran not only in my apartment, I would go off in the city and just shoot different things, and also hide hidden so nobody can see me filming it, and crop my face out. So it was interesting. It was a project. I've never done anything like that before. And it was basically for my safety, because I was stuck. The country was closed, and I didn't know how long I was going to be there. So I thought maybe with me not revealing myself, I would be okay while I'm there, and then I would also be okay possibly returning for them not knowing it was me. That's the main reason, for my safety. And but it worked out. She did a great edit. Her editor's amazing. Put it together. And also, if I can go back to the point of the messages, I started reading. I don't even remember most of those messages. It was like such in the moment, but it was a great little addition to the movie. I won't lie. Thank you for that, Melinda.
Yeah, it really worked beautifully. So what was it like? So the demonstrations happened on July 11th, and the government really cracked down. And what was it like for those weeks after that in living in Havana and witnessing all of that?
Those acts, not too many people know, but the main protest was the 11th of July. But there actually was a few other protests days after, just not the volume, because the police caught on, the government caught on, state security caught on, and they were just in masses. They were in full mass. All the streets was totally police, military, everything. Everybody was in Havana, in the main cities, which was central Havana and a couple other provinces. But I actually also heard that the Cuban government sent out alert to bring back all military that was working outside of the country, in Venezuela and other countries, and they were shipped back immediately. And also, there's also some footage of buses that they brought in. Anybody that worked for the government that's a communist, they were bussed in from other areas into the city. So it was just, the city was completely militarized. I mean, they even see you walking, they're just on top of you. I mean, it was like Nazi Berlin, if I can use the term, like Berlin, 1934, 46. It was just horrible. People were being arrested because it was already the fuel to the fire was COVID. The lack of everything, the crazy masking and the vaccination, and so people were just fed up, and that was just the tipping point. And afterwards, it was horrific. They were just busting people's doors down. I hate to say, there's a lot of people that tattletale in each other. You think they're your friend, but they're not actually your friend, just so they can get a little bit more food or a little bit more something. So everybody tattletales on everybody, and from all this footage that was out, unfortunately, the Cubans aren't aware of covering up your face when they protest. They don't know. They don't protest. Normally, you should cover your face up from the camera. So everybody knew the people, and they went out and arrested them. One guy got shot. He didn't die, but he was shot in his house. People were being ripped out of the house. There's crazy footage. I didn't actually see that, but I saw footage of that, and it was just horrific. The police brutality the day of was terrible, but it doesn't compare anything to what happened afterwards, when they just went full force and just looked for all these people and arrested them and did what they did. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
So much of what American Insight focuses on is freedom of speech, human rights, and the rule of law. And it seemed like the concept of the rule of law there was kind of non-existent. There were all kinds of detentions. As I understand it, there were some military trials for civilian people and all of that sort of thing. So it's a really, really important story to get out. So let me ask, so far you've shown the film in Italy, and you won Best Director, congratulations, at the Social Film Festival in Italy. Tell me what the reaction was there.
The reaction was, you know, when I heard, a lot of the young people came and watched the film, and, you know, to see the imagery. I mean, because in the film, I don't hide and I don't shy away from the reality of what was being experienced by the Cuban people. I think that would have been an injustice. I think not to show those images when it really depict the true nature of what they were experiencing. And, you know, one of the questions that was asked from the audience member was about showing those images, the depiction of those, you know, images. And I said, you can't hide from the ugly. If we hide ourselves from the ugly, then we're not living in reality, and we're not really understanding the plight of our brothers and sisters. And to show those images is to really help us understand, one, how, you know, fortunate we are in a lot of countries, but two, the need to do something. We can't continue just to say that's happening elsewhere. And I think if we start to understand, you know, and we have to use our voices. We have to use, you know, I have the, you know, fortunate ability to tell stories, and I use that talent to be able to tell the story, and hopefully that this film continues to get out there and make a difference. And, you know, I asked Tommy, I said, you know, what is it that you want for this film? What's your hope? And I told him mine, and, you know, maybe I'm dreaming too big, but I want to get it to the UN. I want it to, we start to hold our elected officials accountable. We're seeing that in the movement of the climate, you know, crisis, the climate, that environmental crisis that we're facing right now, climate change. And we should absolutely hold industries responsible for their dealings, government responsible. And like I said, maybe I'm a big dreamer. But, you know, dreaming big has gotten me to where I am today. And I guess I don't see the need to stop in that. And I think, and to hear I mean, afterwards, I stayed with the young people. I don't know for how long. I mean, it was a good half an hour to hour, they're just talking and asking questions, and they really care. And that gives me hope, because, you know, they are our future, and it's sad, the future that we've left for them so far. But for them to really care and be vested in what's happening around the world and other people that they don't know at all, that says a lot to me. So I think it's time that we step up, we as a whole in society, and, you know, make strives to make changes that better all of us.
And I gather it's going to screen in Washington?
Yes, so I have so the US premiere, well, technically I got the notice from you all in, you know, in August, but yeah, the US premiere will be in will be at the Seattle Latino Film Festival on October 8th. And then the Tacoma Film Festival picked it up. And the Social Justice Film Festival, another festival in Seattle, also picked it up. Mm-hmm. And I'm waiting to hear back. So, and then looking forward to it screening at Free Speech Film Festival in Philadelphia.
It'll be fascinating to see once it's screened in this country.
Yes.
And hopefully that'll get some real attention to it. Are you as optimistic, Tommy, as Melinda is about what can be achieved possibly?
Yes. I mean, you have to be. You have to be hopeful. You have to hope for the best. That's all we can do. We can't change the future. We can only hope for the best outcome. And, you know, lay the seeds and put the foundation, and hopefully wake somebody up. The right people see it, somebody will see it. You don't know who will get to see it with some power, and they'll be able to do something, hopefully.
When I spoke to you earlier, you had this wonderful way of, what is it you said? I guess I was asking you how significant you thought these demonstrations were, and you said it was a stone. A stone came out of the wall. The wall hasn't come down yet, but it's sort of the beginning. And
Yeah. Yeah, of course I was mentioning like Berlin, but yeah, it was the first big stone that fell with this repression and communist regime and everything that's going on in Cuba. I mean, if quite honestly, it's just I was kind of blinded myself. I won't lie. Even being a Cuban, I wasn't aware of what was really honestly happening. I knew they were poor. I knew they didn't have nice things, but I didn't know to what level it was. Even myself, being Cuban, until I went there and visited my families and made new friends and ventured off. It's just the world needs to know, it's not any paradise whatsoever. Absolutely not. It's a prison. It's an island prison with 11 million prisoners. Basically, is all it is.
mm. Well, you as a Cuban citizen and an American citizen, you have a condo there. What you've done by revealing this and now going public with it, you probably won't be able to go back to Cuba. Is that your feeling?
Oh, I could go back unless for some reason, because some Cubans, some other what they call dissidents, they weren't allowed back. They they would allow me to step foot in Cuba just so they can arrest me. Let's put it that way. So I can go back if I want to be arrested. So, but I choose not to go to Cuban prison, because I already know they're looking for state security. Everybody wants my family looking for me. It's basically the Secret Service of Cuba. And they were looking for me multiple times and asking when I'm coming and what's going on and where is he. So I'm quite aware I'm on a list. I'm on top of a list. Really, it's probably a really big list, but I'm up there somewhere. And the minute my name pops up at the airport, they'll just, take me to wherever they're going to take me and bury me off and won't see me for a long time. If I can interrupt, there's actually there's a Cuban German also that's doing exactly what I was doing. And they caught him, actually. They grabbed him. And I think his sentence was 7 years prison for just filming in the street, And I luckily had my bicycle, and I was actually chased a couple times by police officers. Literally almost got me. And I just run off with my bicycle. They couldn't catch me. So, yeah, I don't think unfortunately, I'm going to lose a lot not going back. And I really want to go back. And I actually spoke to my cousin yesterday. He's like, gosh, we miss you. We want you to go back. We love your energy. But I don't see it happening in the near future, unfortunately. But it is what it is.
Melinda, there were so many different elements to the film, and between the archive footage and stuff from social media and Tommy's footage. Tell us about how you went about putting it together and the poetry, and it was absolutely fabulous. So just walk us through your production.
Yeah, the first thing was looking at the elements that I had and also realizing the limitations I had. I was here in the US, Tommy's over in Cuba. I don't have access to go to Cuba. And, and even if I did, bringing a camera crew, just, it wouldn't happen. It just, they're going to ask, they're going to want to know and get that footage back. And so I had to work with what I had. And my big inspiration is I'm always pushing myself to do the film, pushing my abilities to make myself better as an artist, as a director. I mean, really, ultimately, as an artist is what I think of myself is first and foremost. And Tommy's like willing to do this project, but no face, absolutely no face. And I did not want to do this, blurry out of the image or black and white, which is done quite a bit in documentary filmmaking, that's fine. That's somebody else's way of telling a story. And I'm really drawn to imagery, and I'm really drawn to, I love the nitty gritty rawness of human conditions. And so my two favorite directors is Leon Chasso, who Leon and I were communicating back and forth. He's a Cuban American director, phenomenal director. I mean, did Sugar Hill with Wesley Snipes, El Cantante with Jennifer Lopez, and Mark Anthony pushed Jennifer Lopez in a way that I have never seen her acting abilities ever. So he was with me and he's brutally honest. And he said to me, "Why are you doing this? No, you're not Cuban. Nobody cares, Melinda. Nobody cares." And I said to Leon, I'm still going to do this. And it's a violation of human rights. And my other favorite director is Wong Kar-wai. Wong Kar-wai, and I would send Tommy these like inspiration shots. A lot is from Wong Kar-wai, and it's how I take a lot of my, amateur. I'm not a professional photographer, but how I like to capture imagery. And Wong Kar-wai he draws an audience in, not necessarily by the dialogue alone, it's the surrounding environment. And so I was like, Tommy, what can you show me within your area that you have? And a lot, most of Tommy's shots were done in his apartment when he's talking, and I think it allows the viewer to pay attention to what he's saying. And Wong Kar-wai has this fantastic way of doing that with, In the Mood for Love, and you're falling in love with the environment, and you're falling in love. Tommy goes out and he's getting these footages and he's sneaking them, putting his life at risk so people see the beauty and the tragedy of Cuba, and to fall in love with Cubans even a little deeper, right? And a little bit more, and to want you to continue to watch. And then it was like, okay, I've got Tommy's story, but how do I support that? And it's just, I was going through, I had a associate producer and research, and we're just combing through social media and just going everywhere that we could to find and pulling them out. And you had to get these apps to download it at the time and save them. And I would send them to my editor, and I just constantly sending things to my editor. And I'm like, save this under this, this under this, and this under this. And then my editor's fantastic, and Levi would, find access to archival footage that we were able to share and use, that was free for us to use. And then some of the imagery, things that we found, and I would tell Tommy, because he would talk about how the president of Cuba was talking about, COVID and how we're doing so fantastic and wonderful in Cuba. And I said, Tommy, do you think you could find this? Do you think you can access this? And so, he would. And it really was a team effort. And everybody who did this project in the beginning was all doing it really because they cared, because they really cared, because no one was getting paid. None of us got paid. And my editor and I would Zoom and edit sessions via Zoom. And at the time, I was using my cell phone to begin with, wow. Being an artist, and, funds were limited. But it was important to get the story out. So that's how it all came together. And the poetry, because of the fact is, Cuban has a very beautiful arts community. There's a lot of artists that I have met that are Cuban, and the music is done by a Cuban, Emmy award-winning Cuban musician. It's all Cuban. I mean, everything you see on that screen, those voices are Cuban voices, Cuban or Cuban American. I'm the people behind the scenes were just putting it together. I didn't want myself to be in it. It wasn't necessary. I don't, I can't tell the story better than the Cubans can tell it. So why even bother? Of course, Tommy, I consider a production, because he brought in footage for us besides being the narrator and telling the story. And there's Tommy, there's Levi. I mean, us three were the main ones all the time. And then I had an associate producer who would reach out and, some communications. We got Andy Garcia to approve to use his footage. We had to get his approval. And he said, when he saw the final product, or one of the solid rough cups, he said that this is an important documentary that needed to get out. So I had an associate producer reaching out to different organizations, and Cuba Decide was one of the organizations where we got Rosa Maria to be in the interview. And then when we filmed Rosa Maria, we did it via Zoom. And then when we filmed with Jorge, who also did the music, and we ended up having 2 camera guys at the time. And then I had a research archival producer and kind of like a consulting producer. So that was it. But I mean, dominantly the whole time, consistently, was just three of us. It was honestly I mean, I went and got, I applied for grants and stuff, but we all did it for free. It was all free. So I mean, no one is, I mean, I got a small grant, and so I started to divvy that out, but no one really got paid. I mean, yeah, I mean, the production value, what is that? That it's definitely extremely higher production value, but people were all willing to do this for free. So the actual technical cost of it was free at the time. I mean, I spent a lot of money to get it out to be seen in film festivals. I will need to get, an insurance on the film.
I remember, Melinda, when we first spoke, you said this is really a hero's story, this film, and Tommy being one of the main heroes of the story, along with a lot of the other Cuban people who spoke out and took the risks. And I thank you, Tommy, for being there and being our eyes and ears, and Melinda for shepherding this wonderful film.
Imagine a government party that you hate, or a president that you absolutely hate. You cannot vote them out. 62 years of a president or a party that does not represent you, that oppresses you, that steps on you, that doesn't speak for you, that doesn't give you the bare basic human needs that you need, and you're forced to accept them for 62 years. Imagine that. This is about systemic oppression. This is about what the people of Cuba are yelling when they're in the streets fighting for freedom. To reduce it to an embargo is unethical, it's insensitive, it's tone deaf, and it is willfully ignorant. If you want to know what's wrong with people, listen to them. Cubans are crying and dying for freedom.
I shouldn't go back, especially with this documentary. They'll definitely arrest me. So I'm gonna lose my apartment. I have friends, I have my family. I'm gonna lose all that to put this information out. I'd called and spoken to my cousin back in Cuba, told him that they would possibly be coming to visit him to find out about me, find out when I'm coming back. So I actually left a code for him to send me a text in case they were listening into his phone calls, just to send me a text, and then I would know that they came to see him. Less than a week later, I received that text. So I called him up the next day through a different phone, and he basically tells me, yeah, 3 supposed immigration guys came asking about me, asking about my passport, how long is he going to be gone. Now I know I definitely cannot go back.
Por ti, mi Cuba, estoy también en pie, para que todos seamos realmente felices y que la oración de redención que se gritó en silencio ahora sea un estruendo que despierte sin temor la rabia contenida y florezca de nuevo en tu tierra fértil el canto de tus infinitos reclamos.